I recently came across a tweet the other day from Ruben Kihu, who is the co-founder of Charge Energy, and he works with young developers in Africa. And the tweet said, 2 years ago, I was taken to hospital twice from extreme burnout and sleep deprivation. Did you see that side of my journey? No. Did it exist? Yes. As you get into tech, don't just be motivated by the success of techies. Ask about their struggles too. And this tweet took me back 2 years ago when I was having a conversation with some young developers in Africa. And they were opening up about the silent struggles a lot of young developers and techies are going through in their day-to-day work. In an increasingly fast and fast-changing world in this 21st century, a time when we are also dealing with a global pandemic, so many of us have been glued to our gadgets, computers, iPads, smartphones, you name it, and we've been spending loads and loads of hours looking at these screens, connecting with people, coding and doing all these kind of things. The other reality is also the fact that our mental health has been gravely affected by this reality, the reality of our work. And it made me want to reach out to persons who are passionate about work in especially technology. Now, for many of us who spend hours on end working with gadgets, talking to gadgets, developing gadgets, either creating solutions, either trying to solve a problem, either trying to communicate to somebody else on the other side of the world, the fact remains that we do exhibit a lot of fatigue from the long hours that we spend working through these machines. The fact remains that so many of us do not know how to deal with mental health problems. And because we are living in an incredibly unequal world where many of our struggles do not get to see or to hear the light of day. As a therapist who works mostly with young people who have undergone childhood trauma, I do get a lot of clients who come to me saying that they are having a hard time at work, well, because a lot of the unresolved traumas that they underwent through their childhood keep manifesting in their adult life as either during work, in their relationships, and so forth. And I've been very passionate about speaking up on mental health because I feel like so many of us do have these struggles, but we do not know how to go about them. If I was to share a bit of what happened to me, when I was 15 years old, I went through depression for the first time, but I didn't know depression had a name until 15 years later, when I was about 29 years old, going through suicide ideation for the second time of my life since I was 16 years old, and having to come out with my story at a time when I actually felt writing was the only way out for me. Now, at the time, I didn't know anything about mental health. I didn't know anything about depression. I didn't know anything about post-traumatic stress. I didn't know anything about psychology, neurotherapy, or anything around the field of work that I'm in right now. But I do remember that the time I came out with my story, so many other people reached out to me saying, you know what, brother, we too are in the same hole, but we do not have a language for our pain. And I went out to search for stories. And what I could find was only stories from European countries around what mental health was like. And so I could only read stories about people I couldn't reach, which made me want to come out more with my healing journey, and that's when I started documenting what healing looked like for me, because I went to therapy. And I mean, being a man, again, in Africa, you're not expected as much to talk about your troubles, talk about your pain, talk about your emotions as openly as I often do. And continuously, as I documented these stories, I saw the need of Africans especially coming out to tell their stories around mental health, and particularly those of us who spend loads and loads of hours with our gadgets, working, coding, communicating. There is one thing about our bodies that we do not understand, and that is how our brains work and how that is connected to our nervous system. Now, our nervous systems are the wires in our bodies that help us connect with other people and the outside world, how we interact with our environments. And for most of us who spend loads and loads of hours working on our own, it becomes very difficult, because at the end of the day, many times we feel very detached from humanity, we feel very detached from our own bodies, we even feel detached from our most immediate relationships. And you find that increasingly, especially persons living or working online, or young developers, or just in the tech industry, you find that we are increasingly using more antidepressants. More and more people are dying by suicide. More and more people are being diagnosed with depression. And because, again, it is largely a male-dominated industry, there are many unheard conversations, because men technically do not really come together to talk about their troubles like that. And so issues like substance abuse, issues like alcoholism are really on the rise, and these are issues which we must continuously air out, speak out about, because we can no longer continue living like this sustainably. So what am I recommending? It's really important today that even with our work communities, that we start developing creative and safe spaces for work, where people can feel humanized, not just because of their level of productivity, but also just their mere existence, right? And this we can do just by creating talking times at our offices, or creating specific rooms where people can go and rest and just, get something to help them unwind, or create days in the office where people can just get to know more about each other, get to talk more about their lives. And also create a work culture where we can encourage workers to connect more with their relationships, with their families, because as opposed to us thinking that the more hours we put into work, the higher the productivity, our bodies are really suffering. And one way to work around that is just creating spaces where people can be able to find rest, develop healthy communities for themselves, and feel supported in their way of just doing life. So I encourage you, find communities, create rest for yourself, develop a work culture that can be healthy in order to work